It was Christmas Eve, and I overheard something that shook me to my core. My daughter-in-law speaking with Ethan had plans to throw me out after the holidays, no warning, no care. I stood there frozen, knowing the moment had arrived. I never thought it would come to this, but sometimes betrayal isn't whispered, it's shouted. Ever had a moment when you realized everything was slipping away? Share your story with me in the comments. It happened during dinner one evening as I sat in my usual chair at the table. The laughter around me felt distant, like it was coming from someone else's life. The whole family was there, Ethan, Sarah, even the kids. But it wasn't the usual warmth. Something was off, like a crack in the foundation no one wanted to acknowledge. I heard them whispering low and sharp. Sarah's voice was barely audible, but clear enough to slice through the tension. "We'll get him out after Christmas. It's time." My hand gripped the edge of my fork so tight that my knuckles turned white. Ethan didn't even flinch. He just nodded. No surprise in his eyes, no hint of hesitation. I didn't make a sound, didn't move. I felt the blood rush to my head, but I couldn't show it. Not yet. For a moment I thought I might have imagined it. But no, the words were real, and they hit me like a slap. My own daughter-in-law, the woman I'd bent over backward to help, was planning to toss me out of the house. I was the one who'd welcomed her into this family, and now I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. What would be the point? They'd made their decision. Ethan was going along with it, just like always. I wasn't surprised, not really, but I was furious, a rage I hadn't felt in years, simmering just beneath the surface. I could feel it building, but I kept my face neutral, my voice calm. "Eat your dinner," I said, pushing the anger back. "We don't need this tonight." I managed to finish the meal without a word, without drawing attention. They all went on as though nothing had happened. I excused myself early, pretending to be tired. The silence that followed me to my room was deafening. As soon as the door closed, I finally let myself breathe. This was the moment. Everything I'd put up with, everything I'd swallowed for the sake of keeping peace, had led me here. But I wasn't going to let it slide this time. Not anymore. For the first time I felt the weight of my silence. It had made me invisible. Now it was a threat to my dignity. Tomorrow things were going to change. I didn't know how yet or exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to sit by and let them take everything from me. My silence had run out. The days after that dinner felt like I was walking on thin ice. Everything was shifting, but no one else could see it yet. They all went about their business, oblivious to the fracture in our family that I now carried in my chest. But I could feel it deeply in my bones. I hadn't spoken about it to anyone. Ethan hadn't either. But the change was unmistakable. At breakfast, no one met my eyes. I could feel their curiosity, their discomfort, but no one said a word. My son David asked if I was feeling all right. His tone was too light, too casual, like he was waiting for me to brush it off, tell him I was just fine. The words sat at the tip of my tongue, but I didn't say anything. Each passing hour, the silence between us stretched. The only sound was the clinking of forks on plates, the soft hum of the air conditioning. I found myself withdrawing even further. Every glance they threw my way felt like an accusation I couldn't explain. They didn't know what I had overheard. They didn't know what was brewing just beneath the surface. I caught Sarah's eye once, but she quickly looked away. There was something different about her. Her usual warmth, that friendly smile, now seemed like a mask. She didn't even ask about the weather like she used to. Nothing. Just silence. It was as though we were strangers, or worse, acquaintances forced to live under the same roof. That's when the pressure started to mount. The subtle whispers behind my back, the awkward pauses in conversation, the strained smiles people started noticing. I couldn't escape it. Ethan was different too. He used to joke with me about everything, about how we were both stuck in this house, how we made the best of it. But now he avoided my gaze like I was a problem, as if I had become the inconvenience. By day 3, I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I entered a room, I felt like a shadow in my own home. The whispers followed me. It was as if my mere presence was a disruption to their perfect little world. But I couldn't escape, and I wouldn't yet. What terrified me most was the nagging thought that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I was reading too much into Sarah's comment. Maybe I was too sensitive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been here before, this limbo of uncertainty, where the truth was buried beneath layers of silence. But I had always found a way to keep the peace. My entire life had been about keeping the peace. At what point does keeping quiet stop being an act of love and become an act of self-destruction? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what the right thing was to do. And then a voice cut through the fog of my indecision. It was Jack, an old friend of mine, someone who knew me before I became this shell of a man stuck in a situation that wasn't even mine to begin with. "Mike," he said one evening when he showed up unannounced at my door, "you've been carrying this weight alone for too long. You don't have to keep doing this." He was sitting on the porch with me, his voice steady, but the words felt like a punch to my gut. I had spent so much time trying to keep it all together, trying to pretend it was fine. But Jack didn't let me hide. "You don't have to put up with this, Mike. You've always done more than enough. You've been patient, you've sacrificed. But at some point you have to start thinking about yourself." I didn't know what to say at first. The words felt foreign, like they didn't belong in this house of lies I had built around myself. How could I possibly walk away from this? How could I look my family in the eye, tell them I was done, tell them I couldn't do it anymore? But Jack was right. I had been taking care of everyone else for so long that I had forgotten about myself, forgotten that I had needs too. I was so caught up in trying to fix things for everyone else that I didn't realize what was happening to me. "I don't even know what to do, Jack." I admitted the weight of it, finally hitting me. "I don't know if I'm overreacting or if this is really as bad as it feels." Jack looked at me, his eyes serious. "Mike, listen to me. It's not about whether it's bad enough. It's about whether it's right. What they're doing to you is wrong. You've given them everything, and now they're treating you like you're nothing. You're better than that. Don't let them take it all from you. Don't keep letting them silence you." His words hit harder than I expected. I was tired. Tired of being the one who held it all together, tired of letting my own life slip through my fingers. I didn't know what would come next, but I did know one thing: I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to do something. But what? How and what would it cost me? Jack's words still echoed in my head as I walked back into the house. The pressure of the last few days still sat heavily on my chest, but something else was there too, a flicker of resolve. I hadn't heard the rumors at first, but eventually they started to slip through the cracks. Quiet conversations I wasn't supposed to overhear. A comment here, a question there. The word was spreading about me about what had happened. At first I couldn't believe it. People were whispering, and their eyes held that same look of doubt. "Have you talked to Mike lately?" I overheard Linda ask Ethan one afternoon. "I'm not sure he's taking all of this the way you think he is." Ethan's voice was low, barely audible. "He'll come around. He always does." But there was something off in his tone, like he was trying to convince himself. And something flickered in me. Was I wrong to have stayed silent? Had I misunderstood their intentions? Maybe I had. Maybe this was all just me overreacting, reading into things that weren't really there. I began to wonder, was I being too rigid in my thinking? Maybe I wasn't seeing the full picture. Maybe the decision to act was rash, a knee-jerk reaction to the sting of Sarah's words. I had never been one for drama, for confrontation. Maybe it was easier to let things slide, to just accept the status quo. After all, I had spent years doing just that. But could I really let them push me aside? Could I truly sit back and watch as they took everything? When I looked at Sarah, I couldn't help but feel the weight of her coolness. The affection had drained from her smile. She used to ask about my day, would check in to make sure I was comfortable. Now all I got was a brief nod in the hallway or a polite exchange over dinner, but nothing more. And Ethan, who had once been my confidant, seemed to keep his distance, as if the air between us had turned sour. It wasn't just the silence between us. I could feel their actions, the subtle changes in behavior. The meetings they had without me, the decisions that were made without my input. The most unsettling part was how normal it seemed to them, how easy it was for them to make choices about my life, as if I wasn't even there, as if I no longer mattered. But what really unsettled me was how the doubt started to creep into my own mind. Maybe I had misjudged them, or maybe I was the one who had been blind all this time. The silence that used to be a comfort was now suffocating. I began second-guessing myself. What if I was wrong? What if this was just part of their plan, a way to make everything work without disturbing the peace? Then, as if on cue, someone finally spoke up. "Mike, you're letting them walk all over you." It was Jack. I hadn't seen him in a while, but his words hit me harder than anything I had heard in weeks. He had known me for years, had been there during the good and the bad. "You're right," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "I just don't know how to fix this." Jack shook his head, his eyes sharp. "You can't fix this by doing nothing. You've been silent too long, and now look where it's gotten you." His words cut through the confusion I had been wrestling with. I had been so wrapped up in keeping the peace, in trying to make sure everyone else was happy, that I forgot about myself. I forgot about what I needed. "You can't let them control everything," Jack continued. "They don't get to make decisions for you, Mike. It's your life too, and you need to take it back." I sat back in my chair, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of clarity. It wasn't just about standing up to them, it was about standing up for myself. I had been living in the shadows of their decisions for too long, and it was time to step into the light. But even as the resolve built inside me, doubt still lingered. What if I was wrong? What if this was just another moment of foolish pride, of selfishness? The questions clawed at me, but I knew deep down that I couldn't live like this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack leaned forward. "Then stop pretending. It's time to take control." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a surge of strength. Maybe I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I had a choice, and I was going to make it count. The day Ethan and Sarah decided to confront me felt different. The air was thick, like a storm had been brewing for days, and now it was about to break. I had been expecting it, but still, when the words finally came, they hit harder than I could have imagined. Ethan and Sarah called me into the living room, and there was an urgency in their voices. It felt rehearsed, like they had been waiting for this moment, and I was just an unwilling participant in their script. As I sat down, Sarah didn't even bother to look at me directly. She just stared ahead, arms crossed. "Ethan and I have decided," she said, her voice flat, almost rehearsed. "Everything in this house is ours. You don't have a say anymore." The words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't lift. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a suggestion, it was a decree. And they said it so casually, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us. I could feel my heart pounding, the pressure building, but I wasn't going to let them see it. Not yet. "And," Ethan added without looking at me, You need to leave. Now. We don't need a reason. Just go. I blinked, not fully grasping the gravity of what they were saying. My mind raced, but I stayed still. I wanted to shout, to argue, but instead I swallowed the words. I knew that this wasn't the time for emotion. They wanted to provoke me, to push me to react. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Not yet. Are you serious? I finally asked, my voice surprisingly calm. I had to steady myself before I said anything else. Sarah gave a small nod, a barely noticeable shift in her posture that told me she meant it. Ethan, however, remained impassive. His silence spoke volumes. I could feel the chill of it, but I refused to let it break me. I'm not going anywhere, I said. You can't just decide that. The room fell silent for a moment, but their faces didn't soften. There was no hint of doubt in their eyes. They were certain, and that certainty burned through me like acid. I couldn't believe how quickly they had made their move. For the first time, I felt the full weight of how much control they had over me. I had been pushed out of the decision-making, out of the space that had once been my own. I was no longer the father they turned to. I was just an obstacle in their way. But this wasn't about whether I would leave or not. This was about the power they had taken from me piece by piece over the years. And now in one clean sweep, they had taken the last thing I had, my place in this house. I stood up slowly, my mind working furiously. It wasn't the time for rash decisions. I had to plan my next move carefully. Reacting in anger would only give them what they wanted. I'll leave, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. But don't think for a second that this is over. I turned and walked out of the room, feeling the weight of their eyes on my back. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah and Ethan's words replayed in my mind over and over again. The house that had once felt like mine now felt foreign. They had claimed it stripped me of it, and in a way stripped me of myself. I had no intention of leaving, not really. But they didn't know that yet. They thought they had won, that their actions had sealed my fate. But I knew better. The financial blows began shortly after. First, they cut off the allowance I had been receiving for my living expenses. Then the bank accounts I had shared with them were frozen, leaving me with nothing but the little cash I had in my pocket. It was their way of making sure I felt the weight of their control. The losses were starting to pile up. The house was no longer mine. The money I relied on to survive was being stripped away. And then the relationships I had worked so hard to maintain began to crack. The friends who had once supported me now kept their distance, unsure of whose side to take. The whispers started. I had no choice. I couldn't just sit and watch everything I had worked for slip away. But what could I do? I was cornered. As the days dragged on, I found myself slipping further into a corner. They were tightening the grip, and I could feel it. But there was something else, too. A spark. A flicker of defiance that I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was beaten. They thought I would accept their decision. But they were wrong. I had been gathering evidence. The message arrived one evening, the kind you know is important even before you open it. The sender was anonymous, the words simple but heavy. Ethan and Sarah aren't who you think they are. They've been manipulating everything for months. You need to wake up. My heart skipped. I read it over and over, the meaning sinking in slowly like ice water down my spine. Someone knew. Someone was watching them, and now they were watching me too. I didn't know who had sent it. It could have been anyone. Someone who saw the cracks I had refused to acknowledge, someone who knew the real story. It didn't matter. What mattered was that this was the tipping point. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Memories I had buried resurfaced. The way Sarah had always pushed boundaries, making little comments about how things should be done in the house. the constant nagging from Ethan making me feel like I was a burden instead of a part of their lives. It wasn't just the house, it was everything. Over the years, they had manipulated me, made me feel like I was wrong for standing my ground. And I had let it happen. I replayed moments in my mind, Sarah's cold indifference, Ethan's subtle dismissals. They'd always managed to turn things around, make me second-guess myself, make me question my own judgment. But now with this message, the pieces clicked together. I wasn't imagining it. They were taking control, and I had been a fool to let them. I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, doubt. Could I really go through with it? Could I confront them and risk everything? For the longest time I had stayed silent, tried to avoid the inevitable confrontation, but now it was clear. If I didn't act, I would lose everything. I picked up the phone and dialed Jack's number. His voice as steady as ever answered after the first ring. "Mike, what's up?" he asked, his tone warm but expecting. "Jack, I got a message." I started my words, shaky. Someone tipped me off. They said Ethan and Sarah are playing me, that they've been manipulating things for months. Jack paused for a moment. "I had a feeling," he said, and I could hear the weight in his voice. "Mike, you've known something wasn't right, haven't you? You've been keeping it in, but this is the last straw." His words hit me like a hammer. I had known. Deep down, I had always known. But I kept pretending I didn't, kept ignoring the signs. Jack wasn't wrong. It had gone too far. "You can't keep letting them control everything," Jack continued. "This is your life, Mike. You've been putting them first for so long, but now it's time to think about yourself. What are you going to do?" I stared at the message again, my mind racing. Could I do it? Could I finally stop being the one who always takes a back seat? I had spent my life trying to keep peace, trying to hold everything together. But this was different. "I don't know what to do, Jack," I admitted, reluctant. "They've already taken so much. What's left for me?" "You're still standing, Mike," Jack said firmly. "That's what's left. And that's all you need to start. Stand up for yourself. Don't let them take the last bit of your dignity." His words steadied the chaos in my mind. Part of me still hesitated, still wondered if I could just let it go. But Jack was right. I had to stand up for myself. I couldn't keep living like this, silently enduring the control they imposed on me. "I'll do it," I said finally, the words landing like a vow. "I'll fight back. I have to." "Good. I'm here for you. Mike?" Jack said, his voice a steady reassurance. I hung up, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't keep being the victim in my own life. The next day, I started gathering evidence. I wasn't going to confront them without a plan. I needed proof, something solid to match what I knew in my gut. I began to record conversations when they spoke to me, started collecting documents, anything that would show the truth. It felt strange, almost like betrayal. But no, I wasn't betraying anyone. I was protecting myself. I had every right to stand up for what was mine, and I had waited long enough. The days that followed blurred into preparation. I moved like a shadow, staying out of sight, watching, listening. I made sure not to draw attention to myself as I gathered what I needed to make my case. Every piece of evidence, every detail felt like a lifeline pulling me toward something larger, something I could no longer avoid. It wasn't easy, and the weight of what I was about to do hung over me. But it was also a relief. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own fate. The silence had lasted long enough. Now it was time to act. The work began in silence. Every day I moved with purpose, gathering pieces of the puzzle that would help me take back control. I wasn't going to let Sarah and Ethan think they could walk all over me. They thought I was weak, thought they had me cornered. But they were wrong. This time I wasn't going to stand by. With Jack's support, I started gathering documents, old emails, contracts, and even financial records. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start building a case. Jack had an eye for detail, and he knew exactly what to look for. He had been in legal battles before, and his experience was invaluable. "Look here," Jack said one afternoon, pointing at an email I had overlooked. "This one's from Ethan. He's talking about altering some financial records. That could be a big deal." I leaned in closer, my eyes scanning the words. It was clear now Ethan had been playing his games for a long time, using Sarah to help him manipulate things to his advantage. The way he had hidden money, the way he had made decisions without consulting anyone, and the way he had slowly pushed me out of everything. It all added up. I spent hours going over each piece of evidence, analyzing it carefully, making sure I didn't miss anything. I had to stay calm, focused. There was no room for emotion, no room for doubt. This wasn't about anger. It was about taking control of what was mine and protecting my future. As the days passed, the picture became clearer. Every piece of evidence I found strengthened my resolve. I was ready. I wasn't going to let them win without a fight. But just as I began to feel like I was in control, the danger of what I was doing started to make itself known. The first sign came late one night when I received a message. It was brief, with no return address or name attached. Just a single line. "Stop what you're doing. It won't end well for you." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Who could have sent this Ethan Sarah? It didn't matter. Someone knew. They were watching, waiting for me to slip up. The fear started to creep in. Was I being too reckless? Maybe I was pushing too hard too fast. They had power more than I had realized. And now I was starting to feel it. Every time my phone buzzed, I checked it with a sense of dread. It wasn't just the message. It was everything. I knew they were watching me, tracking my every move. Jack had warned me about this. He had told me to be careful to watch my back. "They'll try to intimidate you, Mike," he had said. "They'll make you doubt yourself, try to scare you into backing off. Don't let them." I had promised myself I wouldn't let fear control me, but now the weight of what I was doing was real. They weren't just pushing me out of the house, they were threatening my very livelihood, and I had to protect myself. So I took action. I started taking steps to protect my information, my movements. I set up new passwords, changed the locks on my email accounts, and put a new layer of security on everything. I even went as far as installing software to track any potential hacking attempts, making sure my personal data was secure. But the more precautions I took, the more I realized how far I was going. This was no longer just about the house or the money. It was about something bigger, my dignity, my right to exist in this family, without being trampled on. If I had to fight dirty to keep that, then so be it. The next morning, another message came. This one was more direct. "Stop digging. We know what you're doing. The next step won't be easy." I read it, then threw my phone down on the table. It was clear now they weren't just making empty threats. They were trying to break me. They wanted me to feel isolated, alone, like I was the one in the wrong. But I wasn't. I had done nothing wrong except trust them. And that was my mistake. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't back down. Not now. Jack was there as always, steady and grounded. "They're scared, Mike. That's why they're coming after you like this. You're getting too close to the truth, and they're doing everything they can to stop you." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. The messages, the threats, they were only the beginning. But I had come too far to turn back. Now it was time to fight. I started building my strategy. I laid out the documents, organized my thoughts, and planned each move carefully. I wasn't going to take this sitting down. I had to make sure I was prepared for whatever came next. This was going to be a battle, but I had the tools now. I wasn't powerless anymore. The call came in the middle of the afternoon, just when I thought I could finally catch my breath. It was Linda, my old neighbor and friend, who had always been a good listener. But today, her voice was different. "Mike," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "you need to check your accounts. Something's happened. Ethan and Sarah are draining your assets." My heart stopped. The world around me seemed to blur. I hung up the phone and immediately grabbed my laptop. Sure enough, the transactions were there, large sums of money-moving accounts, frozen assets transferred without my knowledge. I stared at the screen, frozen. How could they? I had suspected this, but seeing it was something entirely different. They had finally gone too far. Ethan and Sarah had made their move. I was no longer just being pushed aside. They were erasing me, taking everything I had left. The house, the bank, accounts, the small semblance of control I had clung to, all gone in a matter of days. My first instinct was to retaliate, to rush to the phone and call them out. But I knew better. This was the moment I had feared, the moment I couldn't ignore any longer. I was being pushed into a corner. The question was, could I still fight back? Was it even worth it? I tried to steady my breathing, to focus. They weren't just targeting my finances, they were targeting my very existence. Ethan and Sarah were making sure that nothing, not even my dignity, would remain. They wanted to bury me, to make sure I had no way to fight back. But I wouldn't go down without a fight. With shaking hands, I opened my folder of documents. All those hours spent gathering evidence, every recording, every email, every piece of information that could turn the tide. I had to prepare. I had no choice. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming everything they had stolen from me. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text. I stared at it, the words as clear as day. "Stop what you're doing. It's already too late." The threat was direct. They knew what I was planning. Ethan and Sarah thought they had the upper hand, that they had already won. But they were wrong. I closed the laptop and stood up, pacing the room. My mind raced. I couldn't afford to let this drag on. They had been planning this for months, but I had the advantage. They didn't know about the evidence. I had the paper trail that would expose everything. I had the truth on my side. I wasn't going to back down. I needed to take the next step. The first strike had been theirs. Now it was time for mine. The next day I met with a lawyer, a quiet, calculating man who didn't waste words. He listened as I explained the situation, showing him the documents, the financial records, the emails. It didn't take long for him to confirm what I already knew. I had a strong case. The manipulation, the fraudulent activity, they were all there. "You're in a position to fight this," he said, his voice steady. "We can move forward with this, Michael. They'll be forced to answer for it." The validation felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt like I had control. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was actively fighting back. But as I left the lawyer's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was subtle, just a glance from someone in the parking lot, the feeling of being followed. I kept looking over my shoulder, the paranoia creeping back in. They weren't going to let this go easily. Ethan and Sarah had made their move, and they were going to push back harder than I could anticipate. But they had underestimated me. They didn't know how far I would go to protect what was mine. I returned home, my mind focused on the task ahead. The strategy was clear now. I would use their own tactics against them, information, evidence, and the law. But I also knew I had to be careful. They had power, and they would use it. I went through my notes again, making sure I had everything in order. As I did, the phone rang once more. This time it was a message from Sarah, simple and blunt. "You're not going to win this. It's over." I didn't respond. They wanted me to react, to show weakness. But I had learned better. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I gathered everything I needed, the final pieces of my plan falling into place. It was time to take action. The evidence I had wasn't just going to sit in a file anymore, it was going to be used. I wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. The first move was mine. It was time to flip the script. I would make sure Ethan and Sarah understood exactly what it meant to try to control me. This wasn't the end for me. It was just the beginning. The legal battle had taken its toll on me. I had won, yes, but there was no satisfaction in it. No sense of victory. Ethan and Sarah had lost, but the price of their loss was too high. They were now facing the consequences of their actions, consequences they hadn't thought about when they first began their game. It wasn't just the law that had caught up with them. Society had turned its back on them too. People who once called them friends now avoided them. Even family members had distanced themselves, no longer willing to support their lies. They had thought they were invincible, but in the end, their actions had torn apart everything they had built. I didn't feel relief, though. I didn't feel any satisfaction from their downfall. All I could feel was the weight of everything I had been through. The years of silence, of bearing the burden of their choices, had taken its toll. And now that the battle was over, I found myself facing something far scarier than any courtroom. I was facing myself. The last few months had revealed so much. I had always been the one to give in, to stay silent in the face of injustice. I had believed that I could hold everything together, that my role in the family was to protect and provide, to be the strong one who never faltered. But that wasn't true. The reality was I had allowed myself to be manipulated, to be used as a pawn in someone else's game. And I had let it happen because I was too afraid to lose the little I had left. Now, I had to confront the truth. I had been afraid of losing the people I loved, but in the process, I had lost myself. I had sacrificed my own sense of dignity, my own sense of self-worth, all in the name of keeping the peace. But that peace had been a lie. I spent the next few days reflecting, thinking deeply about the path I had walked and where I wanted to go. The future was uncertain, but I couldn't keep living in fear of what might happen if I stood up for myself. I had spent too long waiting for others to make the first move, too long depending on others for validation and acceptance. Now it was time for me to make my own decisions. I walked past the house that had once been a symbol of everything I had worked for, the house I had fought so hard to keep. It no longer felt like home. It was a reminder of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. It was time to let go. I wasn't going to move back. I wasn't going to beg for a place at their table anymore. I had fought to reclaim my dignity, and I was done letting anyone dictate my life. "Michael, are you okay?" It was Jack calling me from across the street. He had been there through everything, always offering a steady hand when I needed it most. "I'm fine, Jack," I said, offering a small smile. "Better than fine, actually." He raised an eyebrow. "Better than fine. Sounds like you're ready to take the world on." "Maybe," I said with a shrug. "But I'm done fighting the wrong battles." Jack walked over, standing beside me, as we both looked at the house in front of us. "I've been thinking," I continued. "I've been holding on to so much for so long, and I think it's time I let go of it all. The house, the money, all of it. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I'm finally free." Jack gave me a thoughtful look. "You've got a new lease on life, Mike. What's next, I don't know yet." I admitted. "But I'm not going to sit here and wait for things to happen. I'm going to do things on my terms for once." I turned to Jack, my voice steady. "I'm thinking of leaving. Moving somewhere new. Somewhere I can start fresh." He smiled. "I think that's a good idea. You've got a lot to offer, Mike. Don't let anyone take that from you." It felt like a weight had been lifted. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I had spent so long trying to make everyone happy, trying to fix everything around me, that I forgot about myself. Now it was time to focus on my own happiness, to do what was best for me. The world outside seemed different now. It didn't feel as heavy as oppressive. It was full of possibilities. I didn't know what those possibilities were yet, but I was ready to find out. The journey hadn't been easy. I had lost a lot family friends, the life I thought I had. But in the process, I had found something much more valuable myself. I stood there for a moment, looking at the house one last time. It had been my home, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't the man who had been walked over, the man who had let fear control his life. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who finally understood the importance of self-respect.